our YouTube channel, i4Trust YouTube channel. The main purpose of the meeting today is give you clues and information about what is i4Trust and why we are launching our second open call. The webinar is divided in three main topics. In the first part, Fiverr, Dennis that is with us, will explain what is i4Trust and what are the technological framework about. She will explain how we will using i4Trust building block you can improve or you can boost new services. In the second part, I will take over the floor and I will explain you how apply it to our second open call and how to build a suitable experiment. And in the third part, Rajiv from ICER will give you an explanation and information on how to what is the support program works, and if you are selected, the support that i4Trust partners will provide you to implement your experiment. Last but not least, at the end, I will open the micros, so you will be able to ask questions to our expert and solve the doubts that can arise during this webinar. So now, Dennis, I will you grant access to us and presenter, and you can share your screen. Thank you very much, Dennis. Just a second. The floor is yours.
Okay. So hopefully you can see my screen in full screen mode.
It's working.
Great. Okay, then, yeah, warm welcome from my side to this webinar, where we'll start with an introduction to the i4Trust framework and the different building blocks. And let me first start with what we understand under a data space. And the data space we see as a decentralized data ecosystem built by parties with a common purpose. Or can be also defined as a decentralized data ecosystem built around commonly agreed building blocks, enabling an effective and trusted sharing of data among participants. And what's about these building blocks is something I will present in the following. But in general, what you see on this picture is this typical data space where you have data consumers and data providers, and also components which manage the identities and authorization services within the data space. And additionally, there might be further services like marketplace services, brokers, and so on, to further support a variety of use cases. And finally, iShare and Fireware now bring the necessary components with a basic governance structure also in your data in order to create data. And space, create an i4Trust database. Here's the data provider is publishing some data resources, and knowing that the consumers consume these data services are basically unknown to this provider, and that these consumers know how to consume the data, how to discover these data services. And in order to do that, this requires that all participants are able to speak the same language within the data space. That means you need a common standardized API for the data exchange. This describes the sentences, how you communicate, that you have standardized data models within your data space. So meaning, what are you actually speaking about in your data exchange? And finally, you need common mechanisms for the identity and access management within your data space, so that everyone knows who speaks under what rules. And in the i4Trust project and in the i4Trust framework, we focus now on the secure exchange between smart applications, which means these exchange context and digital twin data, where digital twins are a digital representation of real-world assets and consist of different properties and relationships. And also the whole identity and access management can be managed at an organizational, also at a user level. And we also require a trustless authority within your data space. And finally, we also support data marketplace and publication services. So this is a picture how such data space could look like with different smart solutions, even in different domains. For instance, here, domain of smart cities and smart buildings, and maybe even a smart port. And each of these smart solutions is consisting of different components representing a typical smart solution, where we usually have a context broker and components for the identity and access management. And then there is also the iShare satellite, which is providing trust within the data space among all these different participants here, which exchange data between their context brokers, and then there might be even, as I said, these marketplace and publication platforms within the data space. Now coming to the different building blocks, we divide that in different pillars, namely for data interoperability, so which requires to have common data models for the data exchange, and also common APIs, and even mechanisms to have provenance and traceability. This is the first pillar, and the second pillar is about data sovereignty and trust. So you need components for the identity management, for trust exchange, and also mechanisms on how to access, how to manage the access and to the data services based on control policies. And then the third pillar is about data value creation, which consists of services for metadata and discovery of services, publication and marketplace services, as mentioned before, and also the data usage account. And these three pillars form the technology building blocks, and then there's a fourth one for the governance within your data spaces, consisting of the business agreements, operational agreements, and also organizational agreements. And now within i4Trust, FireWare and iShare are now providing these different building blocks covering all these different pillars in this picture. Especially FireWare is providing components in the sector of the interoperability and data value creation, and iShare the necessary framework for the trust framework and data sovereignty, and also for the governance within the data space. All these building blocks are based on standards, so some even on CEF compatible technologies. So for instance, for the data models, we rely on smart data models based on JSON ID. For the data exchange API, rely on the NGS ILD API provided by the FireWare Context Broker technology, which is one of the CEF building blocks. For an upcoming phase, we also plan to use the EPSI building block to provide provenance and traceability within the data exchange. Then for the pillar of and trust, we rely on these technologies like OpenID Connect or OAuth2, and also the XHTML language for the access control, for the identification of the trusted exchange within the data space. Now, within this framework, we have an alignment with the CEF building blocks, which I also mentioned before, which in this context are on the one hand the EID building block, the context broker building block, and as mentioned before, in an upcoming phase for the EPSI building block. And now coming back to this picture of our data space, here's pictured where you see these CEF building blocks on the one hand in this context broker, then the EPSI building block being part upcoming in a marketplace, and the EID for the identity management and identities of organizations registered at the Trust Authority of the i4 satellite. Now, this whole i4Trust framework is not only about technology, but also about a community. But I think the speakers afterwards will get into more detail about this, but just showing the slide. We are also building a complete i4Trust community where we provide, on the one hand, the trainings and technical support for the technical building blocks provided by FireWare and i4. We have a community platform provided by Funding Box, and then also several digital innovation hubs all around Europe, which also support now the different bottom-up experiments should be formed by the upcoming open call. Now, let's get me back to the building blocks and a bit more into detail about the different components here, starting with the data interoperability. And let me start with the digital twin. What is this? Basically, the digital twin is a digital representation of an asset, of a real-world asset. And this can be characterized by different attributes that might be properties of this asset. And now with Ngs Iod and the JSON LD format, also with relationships, so linked data. And of course, these attributes might change over time, and typically also have a location, but of course, this is not a must. And now the cornerstone for the development of an interoperable and replicable smart solution is now, as also mentioned before, to have a standardized API for getting access to this digital twin data and having standardized common data models associated to this digital twin classes representing your real-world assets. And that's what FireWare has driven now in the standardization and adoption for the API. It's the Ngs Iod API. It's based on the former Ngs IV2 API, but now also supporting linked data. And in addition, we also have the Smart Data Models initiative with already more than 500 standardized data models for these assets. Now, how does a typical smart solution look like, which is based on the FireWare architecture? So usually you have your real-world assets, your context data. It might be, for instance, in the context of smart cities. It can be, for instance, some bus, some location, and some number of passengers, for instance, or also any shops or citizens within your city. And for each of these assets, there's a digital twin representation, which is stored in the FireWare Context Broker technology. So there's all the time an exchange about these real-world assets. And then on the other hand, you have your applications or services which want to process, analyze, or monitor these digital twin data, and which is then able now to directly access this context broker API using a standardized API and receiving the data according to standardized data models. Maybe even a more complex picture. This is how, for instance, the smart city reference architecture looks like. But it's basically the same picture as before. On the lower level, you have your real-world assets, which can be any IoT devices or any vertical solutions, or even other information sources, some different systems. And then there's level where you have different IoT agents and system adapters that transfer these data into this context broker and for storing this digital twin data according to the standardized data models. And then on the upper part, you have your actual applications and algorithms and dashboards and so on, which only need to access now the standardized API of the context broker. And next to it, there can be then components for the identity and access management and even marketplace services for offering your services. So what is Ngs Iod? Well, it's simple but powerful REST API. It supports different HTTP methods like get, post, patch, and delete operations to interact with the context broker and to interact with the digital twin assets stored there. Also supports operations for geo queries. You can subscribe to certain entities to changes to their values to receive notifications. There are pull and push styles for gathering data. Data can be rendered like value pairs on port operation. Federation mechanisms. Now, data more collaborating with smart. The Firewall Foundation is called different organizations towards the definition of common data models in multiple domains. So it's not only smart city, but there's also smart energy, smart environment, and so on and so on. And establish standards, and all of the rely on the step the reason need to funding mapping things from JSON correspond JSON LD Ngs LD request for the APIs. This is all can be found under this GitHub link for the smart data. Also developers also attribute this whole repository, which is then split into smart cities and subject the actual data models. Now to the next pillar, data sovereignty and trust. In general, the identity and access control policy should be handled both at the organizational level within our data space and also at the level of actual users of the applications, which would be actual human identities. And this whole framework is based on standards like OpenID Connect or OAuth2 and XACML as policy language. And there's also trust authority for the certification of trusted organizations within the data space. And an important aspect is that this whole framework does not rely on single global identity providers and policy authorization registries, but this can be organized in a decentralized way so that each organization have their own identity provider of their own choice for managing the identities of their own end users. Yet each organization is having their own authorization registry for storing access policies and even having own components like a PDP proxy and PDP servers for handling the access management. And all of this is provided by the iShare framework, allowing different type of and machine-to-machine interactions where there are no humans involved, but also supporting human-to-machine interactions where really human identities are interacting with machines and applications, usually using some kind of user interface. The authorizations can be very coarse-grained, the broad authorization, and even fine-grained with very specific authorization, but basically access policies can be defined on an attribute-based level in the end. And these identities, as said, can be spread around different identity providers, which might be part of the own environments of the different organizations. And the framework even allows to delegate access rights to other parties or other users within this framework. But still, all these service providers and customers have full control of their access rights to their services and can also modify or withdraw access at any time, whenever they wish. Now, the iShare framework generally describes different roles within a data space. So there's some data provider, data owner, and a data consumer. And these might use existing identities that are available within the data space in different identity providers, which is an additional role within the data space. And now the iShare standards allow now these data owners to authorize the access to their data using authorization registries to different consumers. And all of this, there's the trust authority, the iShare satellite, providing the trust in this whole data space so that consumers and providers can all the time verify whether they are communicating with a trusted participant of this data space. And with this whole framework, one can construct any kind of complex data space now where different kind of organizations are exchanging data, authorizing different other organizations. These organizations might delegate access rights to actual end users, human users, which allows now to set up domain-independent data spaces within this whole framework. Now, the components to be used to implement this framework are also provided by FiWare, and so the fiber security components already now comply with standard-based iShare specifications and can be hosted by each organization separately. And, for the identity provider, there's the FiWare KeyRock component, which can serve as an identity provider, but also as an authorization registry. So it's supporting these two different roles within the data space. And for the access management, there's a FiWare API umbrella, which serves as an PEP proxy and PDP server following the iShare specifications. And currently under development, there's also a Kong plugin to be published soon. It's basically allowing for the same task as API umbrella, but implemented within the Kong API gateway. Of course, alternatively, participants might use any other identity provider and authorization registry services as long as these are certified iShare compliant components. And finally, the certified iShare satellite is always required within the data space to serve to act as a trust authority. Now, the third pillar about data value creation. We also support data marketplace services, as I mentioned in the beginning, so which allows to define your actual offerings of data providers around the digital assets, which could be simple files, but also even right-time data access and data processing services. And in the context of i4Trust, which would be then based on the Is Ngs Iod API with the context broker technology behind. And these marketplace services now can also be integrated with the identity management and data usage management frameworks. And all of this relies also on standardized APIs, namely the TM Forum business API ecosystem, which allows to manage the life cycle of these digital assets and the monetization within the marketplace. And basically, data providers could instantiate their own marketplace, or there might be a global independent marketplace service being part of the data space. This marketplace allows for different pricing and revenue sharing models, like basic models, which can be one-time payments, recurring payments, or pay-per-use, which would be then based on the ETSI standard, and also allows for dynamic pricing with fees and discounts. And finally, of course, terms and conditions can be placed on this marketplace, offerings like licenses, terms and conditions, and even service level agreements. Then for data publication, discovery, and brokering services, we have also data portals supporting the DCAT framework and allows for the publication now of data resources which are linked to offerings on this marketplace, and then also allows to harvest actually data from open data portals. And then there are also discovery and brokering services for data, for metadata linked to the description of such data resources. And all of this always based on the Ngs Iod API for accessing this data. And the final pillar is about governance. And there basically the iShare legal framework provides the necessary ingredients to provide the explicit instructions about the conditions under which data can be exchanged in the data space. And basically this happens since everyone joining an i4Trust data space has to sign the same agreement when each organization is registered at the iShare satellite. And therefore, this is creating a network of trust within your data space. This also contains operational agreements, basically meaning, okay, how the data space will be operated, what service levels can I expect within my data space, and also such operational agreements might also define which parties are responsible for providing which services and at which service levels. So finally, this whole governance is of course a key for optimum operation, future sustainability of i4Trust and data spaces in general. And both FireWare and iShare here will be a key for such i4Trust projects to be compatible. FireWare providing the strategic and technical directions for the involvement of the technology, and iShare also providing the governance structure in place to make sure that it remains operational and we have trust within our data space and the network of its participants. And that brings me to an end of this presentation, and thank you for listening. And then I hand over back to Rosa.
Thank you very much, Dennis. So now I will, now that we all know what is i4Trust and what i4Trust is offering, I will explain and provide information on how to apply for our open call and how you can get funds, but also support on implementation of i4Trust. So i4Trust has launched two open calls. The first one, the first 13 experiments are currently involved in the support program. In this second open call, we will select up to 19 experiments. The total funds available for this to support these experiments is 1.850 million euros, and the selected experiments will be invited to a 9-month customized support program, where because i4Trust is not giving just money, we also support you from the technical perspective and the business perspective to implement and to create your own data spaces. The funds available per experiment is ranging between from 72K to 120,000 euros per experiment, and depending the number of the members of the consortium that present this experiment. The open call now is accepting applications, and the deadline to apply is September 12th. So what kind of experiments we are looking for? The experiments should be made up of a consortium, and in this consortium should have at least one DIH and 3 SMEs or slightly bigger companies. Ideally, engaging 5 SMEs, but the minimum required is 3. In this table, you can see the criteria to determine if your company is an SME or a slightly bigger company. And the 2 main criteria is the number of employees and the annual turnover. If you have doubts if your company is an SME or slightly bigger company, when we are running the formal check to determine if you are eligible to receive these funds, i4Trust follow the recommendations of the European Commission. So the European Commission have 2 main tools to check or to be sure that you can receive funds through i4Trust Open Call. The first one is the user SME definition. It's a step-by-step guide with all the information on how to understand if your SME, if your company is an SME or a slightly bigger company. But also the European Commission also provides a self-assessment, so you can go through a questionnaire, and at the end you will be asked to provide some information regarding your company, the linked companies, and some financial numbers. And at the end you will have a report on if you are an SME or not. These companies have to be registered in the European, have to be a European member state plus UK, but also can apply associate countries, as can be Bosnia-Herzegovina, Ukraine, Switzerland. So how to apply? i4Trust Open Call, the application is an online application. You can find, we have a devoted microsite for the to submit your experiments. It's under this link here. And once you click this button, apply now, you will find the application form. The application form during this process, as the experiments are made up as consortium, you can add contributors, so all the members in this consortium can support, check, or provide information of the different sections. The application form is divided in 3 main sections. The first part is the basic information and consortium composition and legal info. It's general information that allows us to contact you, but also check if you are following one of the most important requirements, and is have at least 1 DIH and a minimum of 3 SMEs. The 3 next sections are the excellence, impact, and implementation. These one are the evaluation criteria. Under each of these sections, you have to provide information regarding your experiment. In the excellence section, we are looking to understand the main objectives or goals of your challenge, of your experiment. So you will be requested to describe the functional and the technical description, and the evaluators will want to understand or know or will pay special attention to the ambition of your experiment. How different is your experiment to another's, and also the innovation level. In this part, as I said, the application form is almost online, filling in this platform, but under the excellence section, you will be requested to provide upload a document that is called the experiment description, that is available in the section that I will be explained later, guide for applicants and documents. In this so next section is the impact, and in this section you should show the market potential of your experiment, but also the business model and the commercialization study. You want to evaluate the scalability of your experiment. Last evaluation criteria is implementation, and here you have to demonstrate how you will use the resources for i4Trust funds, but also the capability that your consortium has to carry out the experiment. So you have to describe the team that is involved, you have to describe the resources that you will put in place to implement i4Trust. Under this section, another document is required to be uploaded, that is the budget. The budget and the description of experiment, the template for these two documents should be uploaded in the application, in the online application form is available in this section, guide for applicants and documents, so you can upload. In the case of the description of the experiment, it's a Word document, so you should upload. In this document, you have clear instructions on how to fill it. And once you finalize, you have just to convert in a PDF document and upload in the section that for the budget is other document that you have to upload in the online application form. Is an Excel file. The first tab includes the instruction, so I encourage you to read it before upload on the site. And then the last part of the application form is the declaration of honor or processing of the personal data, that is the GDPR rules. All the sections that have this red star is because they are mandatory. There are one that is not mandatory, but we encourage you also to complete, because it helps us to gather your information and improve in next open. So what constitutes a sustainable experiment? As I said, the experiment have to be proposed by a consortium. The minimum is 3 SMEs, limited companies, and 1 DIH. But ideally, for us, the experiment should involve at least 5 SMEs and 1 DIH. We are open to any domain. We are asking for real life challenge, but we are agnostic on the domain. So even if it's logistic, agri-food, any domain is more than good. And there are some other important eligibility criteria, and this the experiment should be used the i4Trust component. So the exchange of context and description of the data twins and the usage of digital twins. And other important element is the TRL. So the experiment should be, the TRL of the experiment should be between 3 and 8 inclusive. What happened once the open call is closed? We will start the evaluation process. The evaluation process is defining 4 main steps. So right after the open call deadline, we run an automatic eligibility check, and this eligibility criteria is on section 3 of the DIHs for applicants. The eligible experiments pass to the next step of the evaluation process that we call the expert evaluation. Each experiment will be assessed and scored by 3 experts per proposal. These experts are experts in fireware and ICT technology. So they will score the experiments and propose a ranking list of experiments, and these all the experiments above the threshold, because there are a minimum of 3 per evaluation criteria. The experiments above the threshold will be invited to the selection date. The selection date is an opportunity for the experiments to pitch their experiment in front of a jury. The jury is composed by i4Trust partners, experts in the technology, but also external experts that give you the opportunity to pitch aloud and solve some doubts from the jury members. At that point, we will select up to these 19 experiments. The selected ones will be invited to pass to the next stage, that is the legal check, where we will determine the eligibility of the entities in the consortium to receive funds. If so, the 19 pre-finalists after this legal validation will be invited to sign an agreement with i4Trust consortium, and will be invited to join the support program. This is the timeline. So the open call will be open till September 2022, 12th of September 2022. From September to October, we will run the evaluation process. And in November, December, we will run the legal check. The legal check and the signature of the agreement. So again, if you have doubts or question if your company is an SME and is eligible to receive funds through i4Trust project, we invite you to check this user guide to the SME definition and also to run the self-assessment. The 9-month support program will start in January and is expected to finish in September. So, some reminders. It's very important to read the guide for applicants and also the frequently asked questions. The guide for applicants is a step-by-step guide, support you on the application process, but also you will find all the criteria, the evaluation process, detailed evaluation process, how we will run the legal check. So before starting your application, I recommend you to read the guide for applicants, and in case you have doubts, we have resources to support you during the application phase to submission during the submission of your experiment. We have some training videos. We have all the slide decks that we are using in these webinars, but also in the trainer programs available in SlideShare. But we also devoted a specific open call help desk. You can contact us with two main channels. First one is the i4Trust community. So you can see here that in our community we have a i4Trust help desk. So you can ask the question in this help desk and we will reply to you. And also a specific email account to guide you during this during the application process. This is the end of my presentation. I will give the floor to Rajiv to share and explain how what is the support that will be available to guide you during the implementation of your experiment. So Rajiv, the floor is yours. I will make you wait. Okay. Well, I need to close. Now you are presented.
Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Thank you, Rosa and Dennis, for good presentation. Here I am going to talk about, of course, it was mentioned that we support you through the 9 months customized program once you are selected for under i4Trust after you submit a proposal. So I'll give you a glimpse of what the mentoring program looks like. It's a 9-month customization program where we guide you in terms of implementation of your use case or of your experiment. We provide enough resources for you to learn and upskill or reskill your workforce. Also beyond the mentoring program, so like there are training camps where you can join us to attend the training of i4Trust, as well as recorded sessions and presentations are available for self-learning. Of course, we guide you and bring you the i4Trust framework, which you use for which you use in your experiment to achieve the use case. And we provide support in terms of technical, business, operational, legal, ethical aspects of your project. And last but not least, your selected project also receives the funding, as already explained by Rosa. Okay, so how we see you in throughout i4Trust as a journey. We see basically it's a 4-step journey for SMEs. First is discover. So, well, you are essentially in this phase. You are discovering what is i4Trust, what it offers to you, what it can do for you, how it can benefit you. And with this interest, you participate under the open call, and you become a participant. And the selected projects, after the evaluation on the proposal, will go through the implementation journey, which is what I'm explaining now. So implementation is where the whole mentoring program works. And throughout the program, we also guide you in terms of how you can sustain your experiment and bring it to live and production, and how you can benefit, continue to benefit out of the implementation. So in essence, the mentoring program is divided into 3 phases. The first phase is onboarding phase, where we, of course, in your proposal, you already specify what you want to do, but that's still at a high level. So in the onboarding phase, you will further define the scope of the functionality and technical scope, and also design the solution of what you are going to implement. Right. In the next phase, you further elaborate on how you are going to implement and achieve the experiment. So you start prioritize your backlog, and you also make an implementation plan or development plan. And third phase is basically proof of concept. This is where your development activities mainly happen. And of course, you also validate it against the parameters that we have set for successful i4Trust implementation. And there is a additional phase, which is aftercare, which is beyond the scope of the project or the 9-month mentoring program. So that is because, as I mentioned to you, that during the mentoring program, we will provide necessary tools and guide you in terms of sustainability. And in that sustainability, you can also already plan for aftercare, what you need from us in order to continue to support your project, even beyond the mentoring program, right? And there are various tools that will be made available to you. Additionally, on each phase, what we do from i4Trust partners is, in the first phase or in the beginning of the once you are selected, you will be invited to the welcome event, where you will know who your mentors are, and you will kickstart working on your individual mentoring plan. Since every project is a bit different, we work together with you on creation of individual mentoring plan, where the more specifics of your project are described. In the second phase, we also support you in terms of having cross-value chain bootcamps, finding synergy amongst yourself, as well as with partners from our networks, and so that you can further create links and synergies with other relevant organizations, which may be relevant for your use case. And in the third phase, we also support you with Fundraising Bootcamp, where you explore different opportunities in terms of how you can fund your project for sustaining it in the future beyond the scope of the project. Of course, this is voluntary, so you are still able to decide if you want to take additional funding for sustaining, or you achieve already a sustainable experiment out of this mentoring program, and you don't probably need additional funding. As I said, you will be assigned a mentor. So each project gets 2 mentors acting as primary and secondary mentor for the project, and these are your touch points basically from i4Trust throughout the 9 months of your program. And they of course they themselves are experts in certain topics, but we have wide range of pool of experts as well. And they are experts in different topics. Some of the topics I've listed on the screen, but these experts then can provide you specific in-depth knowledge on these elements, which can help you in your project. Mentors are also coming with a whole set of toolkit. They can set up specific workshops, meetings with specific theme, like architecture meeting, business meetings, functional design, sustainability. So various topics, whatever your project requires, they can provide you with this support and set up specific meetings with specific experts who can guide you on those elements. And of course, as I mentioned, you do an individual mentoring plan. So this is an illustrative of what the overall table of contents look like of individual mentoring plan. Basically, this is where you will describe in detail everything about your project that you are going to do throughout in the 9 months, right? It includes all the KPIs, deliverables, schedule of the project, your descriptions, your architecture, and whatnot. And of course, we are already having from the first open call, the cross value chain bootcamp that is happening on 28th to 30th of June. You are also invited to join this bootcamp, where you can already communicate to the 13 projects that are running under the mentorship of i4Trust partners. And you can try to find synergies with them and learn from them what i4Trust brings to them. That could also inspire you to apply for second open call in the similar context, or you can find synergies to apply together or as an independent. The link is provided on the below the image, and that is it for me. Thank you. And I'll hand it back to Rosa.
Okay, thank you very much. I have a problem with this YouTube, sorry. Thank you very much, Rajiv, for your great presentation. Now it's time for the audience send their questions. I will open them. I will unmute the attendees so they can ask the questions live and address to our experts or me if they need go further in some of the aspects of the technology, the application process of the mentoring. So now all of you should be able to, I think, mute. So there are any questions that you want to ask or thought to share with us? Now is the time for the audience to present. Okay, can you check if we have any questions on the chat?
Sorry, Rosa. Specific questions for Rajiv, you mean?
No, for any of us.
Well, there are some technical questions. But I suppose that all of you can see the questions. Otherwise, I can directly share with you or read the questions.
As you prefer, I cannot see the chat.
Okay. So There is one technical question. Please clarify iShare satellite as in a physical layer, communication satellite. This is a question by Juan Francisco Balbi that has many questions.
But maybe, Juan Francisco, if you want, you can open your mic and answer the questions in your own voice.
Yeah, or at least put the question in chat so I can read it.
Okay.
I don't have access to the chat.
Let me do it. 1 second, because I try to answer some of them. So this is, oh, sorry. Let me drop the questions here. This is one question. Okay, can you read this, Rajiv?
Yes. Yeah. So, well, I'm not fully sure if I understand the question correctly. However, I'll try to explain what is iShare satellite a bit. iShare satellite in a data space is basically a trust anchor. It is a list of participants of the data space, and it provides basic discovery metadata of that participant. So it is essentially a directory, but it is on a shared ledger, so you can interoperate with other data spaces and find participants and interact with other participants from other data spaces as well. I hope this clarifies.
Okay. We have a question from the audience. John Ibarzabal, can you, Johnny?
Yes, I'm not Johnny, I'm Adrian, his colleague. I had one question. I can see on the guide or on the frequently asked questions that it's important to have cross-share participants in the proposal. I would like to know if you have any kind of way for us to discover possible participants, because we have a project, and I think that well, we have various digital innovation hubs that we could present the project and ask for the participants, but we don't actually have any SME or a slightly bigger company outside Spain. So I would like to know if there is some kind of forum or some kind of discover service where we can see maybe some participants that face the same problem that we are currently facing.
The question is for Fundraising. I have to say that it's not mandatory to have a cross-border application, but it's true that we want to spread or prove that this data sharing approach would work in across border experiments. We don't have any specific tool to create matchmaking, but it's planned in July, August. We are planning to organize a networking event. So we invite DIHs to present the DIHs and try to connect with the ecosystem, and we will open the tables to the SMEs that are looking for partners, or the DIHs that are interested in create this cross-border experiments. We have also a survey that is available in i4Trust website, where we are gathering information for these individuals or SMEs that are looking for experiments, and in somehow try to connect with other SMEs that they need. So I invite you to fill in this questionnaire, and also to take part of the networking event that we can. But we don't have any matchmaking services as as much as we can. But yeah, we try to support you in find other partners and find partners outside of your own.
Okay, that's great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I saw one question in the chat, but I think it's or for ICER or Fireware. Can you see Dennis and Rajiv, the question, the second question in the chat?
Yes, about the robustness in latency and availability for real-time and near real-time applications. So yeah, of course, the components, the idea is that it provides, well, very close to near real-time data. But that also depends on your use case, what kind of data you are sharing. Preferably it is real-time. And to add to it, as in within the data space, and that is where the building blocks come into play, the governance building block, where in the organizational and business agreements, you can specify the SLAs for certain service providers within your data space, which are critical for your data space to remain operational, to have certain latency and availability requirements, and that these organizations then make sure that they meet those requirements. I hope this answers your question.
Thanks, Rajiv. Any other question from the audience? I see Jone has the raised hand, but I don't know if it's a new question or is the one that she already asked. Jone, do you have
questions?
Sorry?
No, it's the last one.
Okay. So, no more questions, everything is clear. I mean, we will share this presentation in our YouTube channel, so you can back again and see. And if any other question, not about the webinar, but also if you are applying and you have doubts on any specific question, we invite you to join i4Trust community or contact us through the email that I shared before. So if there are not more questions, thank you very much. Bueno, Rajiv, Dennis, do you want to share something before close the webinar?
No, nothing from my side.
Oh. So thank you very much for joining this webinar today. Hopefully all the information is clear. We wait to see your experiments and be the selected one. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone, and bye.
Thank you, bye.
Bye-bye.